Hi, welcome to Deacon's Weekly Dava. This week's portion is Shelach. It's the fourth portion in the book of Bamidbar, book of Numbers. It's a famous story in this portion of the spies, sending the spies to the land of Israel, that the spies are sent and they give a bad report of the land, and God says, well, if you don't want to go into the land of Israel, then you're welcome to stay in the desert for 40 years. And the consequence is that the Jewish people have to kind of go through the difficulties and hardships of being in the desert for 40 years rather than come into the land of Israel. It's considered the classical mistake that the Jewish people made. They didn't trust in God. They didn't trust it was going to be a good land and He would help them conquer it. At the beginning of this portion, though, as Moses sends the 12 spies to the land of Israel, one of them is called Hoshea. And the Torah recounts that Moses renames him. He calls him Yeshua, Joshua. And they explain, the rabbis explain, what does that word mean? Yehoshua. In Hebrew, Hashem Yoshiacha me'atzas hameraglim. God should save you from what these spies are about to do. In other words, Moses knew through prophecy that they were going to come back with a bad report of the land. He knew that was what was going to happen. But he was hoping that at least Joshua, at least his students, wouldn't get caught up in that. But there's an obvious question to ask on that, and that is, if Moses knew that they were going to come back with a bad report of the land, and it was going to be a mistake that would condemn the Jewish people to 40 years in the desert, why send them in the first place? Why do that? And I think the point here is, it's a point, and the answer to this question brings us down to the essence of our understanding of free will. And that is, God allows human beings to make their mistakes. That's what free will is about. And given that God does that, we need to do the same thing as well. We need to sometimes allow people around us to make their mistakes. That's not an easy thing. You know, when we have people we love, there's a tendency, there's a desire, there's a feeling of need to control them. We would love it if people who we care about would always make the right decisions, would always do things that are best for themselves, would always walk down a good path. What we need to realize is not only do we have no right to make those choices for those we love, we also have no possibility of doing so. It's just not going to happen. And I think the easiest place to see this is in children. You know, as parents, we have a responsibility to guide and to assist our children, but we do not have the responsibility to coerce them or to manipulate them. I would say potentially the hardest thing for a parent to accept in all of the experience of bringing up children is the fact that our children have their own choices and will ultimately make their own choices. And painful as it might be, some of those choices are going to be wrong. Some of those choices are going to lead them astray and they're going to make mistakes. We don't want our children to make mistakes. We love our children. But as parents, we need to recognize that that's just going to happen. We don't create independence in our children by helping them always be right. Sometimes, often perhaps, they need to make a choice, see that it's wrong, and learn from the fact that they did something wrong. You know, I can tell my kid 1,000 times, don't touch the hot cooker, don't touch the hot cooker, don't touch the hot cooker. But if he touches it just once, he's going to know that he doesn't want to touch it again. Now, I'm not advocating putting your kids' hands on the hot cooker. You know, I'm not advocating let your kids run in the road or sample heroin. I'm not saying that. There's a cost-benefit analysis that you've got to make. But most times, and I really say most times, shielding our children from making wrong decisions might save them from trouble and harm in the short term, but you don't teach them how to avoid making the same mistake in the future. You're stopping them, and when you're not there to stop them, they will make the same mistake the next time around. We need to educate our kids. We need to do the same thing with those around us. Share the ideas we have, but we cannot force, because when you force people, you don't bring out their own independence. The Jewish people didn't trust God that He was bringing them into a good land. They didn't have that confidence for one reason or another. Now Moses could have glossed that over. Moses could have said, "Come on, let's go in anyway, and we'll do it, and don't worry, it'll be fine." But that would have just been icing on the cake. That would have just been glossing over. There was a problem there. He wouldn't have solved the problem. Moses tried to teach them over and over again, and it hadn't worked. What are you going to do? It comes to a point where a person needs to make a decision, even if it's a wrong decision, and learn from that mistake. There just wasn't any other way. The Jewish people needed to send spies, and they needed to make the mistake, and they needed to go through that experience and learn from that experience. And that's part of life. Part of life is oftentimes we need to learn from our mistakes. And God allows us to make our mistakes in order that we can do that, and we need to allow others to do the same. It's a fine balance to educate, yet respect independence. It's much, much simpler to control. It's a fine balance, but if we care about our children, and we care about those we love, it's a balance that we absolutely have to find. Wish you Shabbat Shalom. If you're interested in learning more about Tikkun, please log onto our website, tikkun.co.uk. Specifically, there's a link here that please follow, please take a look at. Been advertising it for the past couple of weeks. It's a link for our supper club. It's a beautiful and wonderful program that we have in order to help the homeless. It's something you can be involved in, something you can engage in, and it's something you can get your children involved in as well. I'm confident that if you take a look and take an interest and get involved, it's something you'll find meaningful and genuinely valuable. So please take a look at the link up here and come along and share with us this wonderful experience. Shabbat Shalom.